a new leader in Stacy, who is taking over for some big shoes with little feet, I guess, Charlie. And Stacy has hit the ground running, and she is very committed to making sure that we become a very, or continue to be and become more so a very active and engaged committee. And I think we can do that. So I will probably go off screen and turn it over to Stacy to introduce what is the second uh, in our commission series of supporting first generation students, which I know everyone knows is foundationally important. So with that, Stacy, you want to get us on track?
Sure. And again, we have with us several individuals who kindly agreed at the very last minute to share their experience and first generation students. And as Pepper mentioned, this is the second in the Commission's Student Success Series. The thought that with each of these, eventually create action briefs, like what is it? What, so what, and the now what? So that we can move forward with any recommendations that this group might present for consideration. And certainly it will inform the broader work that we're doing as a commission. I guess we'll go ahead and get started, and I apologize because I'm going to be sharing my screen, but as individuals come in, I'll have to make sure that I could admit them. So we're just going, it's like, how many PhDs does it take to run technology? We'll start with our first guest, Maceo Rainey, who was here with us last week as part of our partnership work, but he introduced himself.
Thank you, Stacy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maceo Rainey, and I serve as a director for TRIO Educational Talent Search on the campus of Purdue University Northwest, the Westfield campus. And I also serve the state of Indiana as TRIO president.
Okay, and then he has a presentation. I'm going to pull up here just a moment.
Maceo. I like the picture.
All right. All right. As I begin to offer a few comments in reference to Indiana TRIO and TRIO as a whole, I just really wanted to paint the picture for the folks in the audience today of letting and establishing the fact that federal student aid is simply not enough to get Indiana Hoosier students graduated from high school into college, and also on the road to graduation and college and careers. Federal student aid is a start, but it doesn't contain everything that wraps around with helping first-gen students attain post-secondary and also graduation. It's the federal TRIO programs working collaboratively with federal student aid that provide the wraparound services that help first-gen students meet the needs of a ever increasingly growing competitive society and also meeting the needs of higher education. These two entities working together in collaboration. But most importantly, the federal TRIO programs serve as somewhat of an insurance policy for the federal student aid, ensuring that young people receive the necessary wraparound services that help them remain in college and move closer toward graduation, thus working for a more educated and skilled workforce in the state of Indiana. Clearly, being a federal program located on college campuses throughout the United States and primarily Indiana, federal advocacy is the name of the game when it comes to TRIO federal funding. Some of our institutional members of Indiana TRIO include, but not limited to, IUN, PNW, Purdue University, West Lafayette, IUPUI, Notre Dame, pretty much all of the state schools within the state of Indiana. And together, we brought in $12 million annually through TRIO funding through the United States Department of Education right to the state of Indiana primarily for students that are Pell Grant eligible and self-identify as first-generation college students. We also have 35 TRIO projects throughout the state of Indiana, everything that range from talent search projects to student support services on college campuses, as well as McNair. We have 2 McNair post-baccalaureate programs in the state of Indiana. So we're servicing over 8,000 first-generation college students, low-income first-gen students within the state of Indiana. So I wanted to paint the picture in terms of the federal TRIO programs and our ability to provide specific advocacy in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill that keeps TRIO programs a household name in the halls of Congress. Next slide, please. Briefly, I wanted to take you guys on a brief journey on the genesis of TRIO programs that very little people know so much about, or so little about rather. But TRIO is the birth legislation of 36th President of the United States, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who had a domestic policy of the war on poverty. No one knew about education as a vehicle to success more than President Lyndon Baines Johnson, because he himself grew up as a first-gen student, low-income student in the state of Texas that rose his way up to a level of prominence by virtue of education and starting off as a teacher. As you can see, he's handing the pen over to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was one of the architects of civil rights legislation that ultimately led to the 3 TRIO programs, along with Congressman Adam Clayton Powell from New York City, and also John Lewis, who was a young student at that time. TRIO's birth came from the notion of young people being provided leadership skills, training, and education. And also the Reverend C.T. Vivian, who founded Upward Bound by way of the Economic Opportunities Legislation Act of 1964 that created the first TRIO program known as Upward Bound. So as you can see, the TRIO advocacy and the TRIO history has a long line of federal legislation that are still in existence today. And out of the 60s legislation that came out of that birth was the Fair Housing Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1965, the Voting Rights Act, and where TRIO was impacted at is the Higher Education Act of 1965. All came from the ink pen of the 36th President of the United States, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Next, please. Just as a recap, the first TRIO program was born in 1964 by way of the Economic Opportunities Act, which the Reverend C.T. Vivian coined the phrase Upward Bound and created that project that was passed into federal law in 64. And out of the legislative work of President Johnson, the Higher Education Act of 1965 gave us educational talent search, and then shortly thereafter in 68, student support services that actually operate for actual college students. And there are several other TRIO federal programs that have come under that, especially in the 70s, the Educational Opportunity Centers, the Veterans Upward Bound came about in 72. And then also the Ronald McNair Post-Baccalaureate Achievement Program, which would come in the mid-80s. So there's all in total close to 12 federal TRIO programs that stem from the Higher Education Act of 1965. So that's the birth of TRIO as a whole from federal legislation. Next, please. And also, just so to give you a snapshot of where our funding comes from, because most, if not all of the TRIO funding comes from the federal government, which is why advocacy and support at the federal level is the order of the day. But we are TRIO programs, a line item on the federal budget, and we can be found within the Higher Education Act of 1965, Title IV of that act, which has your TRIO programs, your federal work study, your grants, and your loans can all be found under Title IV of that section. Next, please. One of the most important slides, one of the most important factors that I like to share with this group, because I started earlier by saying federal student aid is just simply not enough to help young people in the state of Indiana not only matriculate to post-secondary, but to remain in post-secondary toward graduation and careers. One of the things that TRIO provides in terms of a plethora of wraparound services include, but not limited to, FAFSA assistance. I think we all know that the completion of FAFSA is the baseline of all financial aid. And we've noticed with the Indiana Commission of Higher Education that last year, under 50% of Hoosier students completed a FAFSA, which shows that there's money on the table not being utilized and certain communities not taking advantage of what a filing a FAFSA has to offer. And also the SAT, ACT test prep. When you're first gen and the first in your family to go to college, these important college admissions exams are very important, and they often dictate how much scholarship money that you're able to apply for. And one of the program services that we provide is test prep for the SAT. Just scoring 1 or 2 more points on the SAT can cause a first gen student to be able to qualify for hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarship money. And also 21st Century Scholar Enrollment is one of the program services that TRIO programs provide, making sure that we are scholar tracking both at the pre-college level and also the active college level to make sure that young people meet their requirements for continued funding for 21st Century Scholar enrollment. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, as I'm a strong advocate of 21st Century Scholar auto enrollment that's currently in both chambers of the House in Indiana at this time. Out of all of the program services, the cultural activities and the cultural exposures are landmark programs that TRIO programs provide, because we all believe that colleges and universities are becoming more and more culturally diverse. And we have students throughout the state of Indiana that come from communities and segments of Indiana that can benefit from cultural awareness, cultural competency, and exposure to the elements of diversity, equity, inclusion, and a welcoming environment. And also the college visits. Again, all of these factors impact first generation with high impact practices that help young people attain post-secondary education, remain in post-secondary education, and work rapidly toward education and graduation that creates a return on investment for Indiana residents and taxpayers, making sure that federal tax dollars are being used in this manner to provide first gen students the opportunity to explore college and attend post-secondary. And at the current trends that we have right now, when we look at Indiana college going rates throughout the board within the state of Indiana, we're simply behind the 8 ball. With the current trends that we have right now, we won't be able to meet the needs of the workforce in the state of Indiana. With 10% of African American students in Indiana choosing to go into post-secondary, and 17% of the Latinx community enrolling into post-secondary. So the work is there. The work is there in terms of the state of Indiana and our commitment to helping young people view post-secondary education as a viable option right after high school. Next, please. As I end my comments, I want to also paint the picture of potential challenges, barriers, and opportunities. Some of the challenges that most of my colleagues throughout the state of Indiana commonly refer to is this notion as the imposter syndrome among first generation college students. That's just a metaphor of young people that are first in their families to attend college, but don't have the wherewithal, the bandwidth, most importantly, the confidence to weather the storms in higher education, or just persevere, or just have a sense of grit to maintain and attend and pursue post-secondary. And many of them have this notion that they're college students masquerading around as college students, but not sincere students. So we do a lot of work within our TRIO programs and our wraparound services that are intentional about building confidence, self-awareness, and resiliency with young people that are the first in their families, to give them that competitive edge to remain in post-secondary. And then there's also this notion of lack of institutional support, where the schools throughout the state of Indiana just simply don't have the infrastructure set in place to accommodate first-gen students, or most importantly, may not have the staff on hand or on campus to lead, guide, and advise first-gen students in a manner that would help find success. And then thirdly, our data is showing us that first-gen students simply lack the social capital that's available that helps young people go from the mailroom to the boardroom or advance in their certain careers. So social capital is very important. And a lot of first-gen students can find social capital if they're attending a school that has the institutional support by way of a vibrant student life, activities, clubs, communities that can provide this level of support. Just a brief testimony. I myself am a proud first-generation college student. My parents were retired blue-collar workers. My father was a retired construction worker. Mother is a retired seamstress. When it was time for me to graduate high school and go to post-secondary institutions, they could offer little to no planning in that area because they themselves never went to college. So having the social capital or someone in the family that can speak the language of post-secondary, have access to people that can create opportunities and windows of opportunity is so critical to first-generation college students in comparison to their continuing education counterparts whose mother or father are college educated, have affiliations, club memberships, you name it, that they can leverage to opportunities. So those are three quick challenges and barriers that the first-gen community in TRIO lay claims to in any scenario. Switching across the board to opportunities that can circumvent some of these challenges and barriers. I just want to begin with access to the federal TRIO programs right here in the state of Indiana. I preferenced earlier that $12 million annually has come to the state of Indiana through all 9 Indiana congressional districts to support TRIO programs. Right here in District 1, Northwest Indiana, our U.S. Representative Frank Mervan Jr. last year was responsible for $1.5 million of TRIO dollars coming to this area to support first-gen students in TRIO programs that consist of Indiana University Northwest, Purdue Northwest, as well as Ivy Tech, Lake County, all benefited from those federal dollars. And then secondly, access to 21st century scholar support. This is landmark legislation and also nationally recognized as probably the best scholar promise in the United States, arguably. But right now in both chambers of Congress in Indiana, we have House Bill 1449 that's still being deliberated upon. So we have our fingers crossed that we can have universal 21st century scholar support in the form of auto enrollment. And that's the biggest concern that I've received from parents in my community, is that they've missed the deadline. Their children have missed the deadline because currently it's set at you have to register for 21st century scholars the 8th grade year, June 30th of your 8th grade year. And also, lastly, access to a vibrant student life and qualified first-generation staff. Having staff on hand at the universities is actually working with active college students that have the wherewithal, the bandwidth, and just the life experience to guide first-generation students that will ultimately increase their confidence, their self-esteem, self-awareness, that will give them the resiliency to stay in college, overcome the barriers, and also contribute to our globally competitive economy. That's all I have, Stacy. I'll take any questions if it's appropriate.
Great. Let's see, hold on, let me just not sharing here. Any questions from ACO?
So do we have TRIO representatives at all of our institutions, or are you kind of the sole guy here in Indiana? Or how does that work?
No, I just represent the interests of our institutional members. Many of our TRIO programs are spread out throughout the state of Indiana, from Northwest Indiana all the way down to the southern tip of Indiana. Schools that you can find the TRIO programs can be warehoused in most instances under the enrollment management, student affairs, or student affairs segment of the university. But we have 35 projects throughout the state of Indiana, spread out throughout the state.
I had a question, ACO. Like you mentioned, ACT, SAT prep, college visits, et cetera. Are you working then within the K-12 space, or those who are coming to your institution as interested applicants?
Great question. My domain is pre-college, and that's simply 6 through 12, because that's how the federal setup and the guidelines are crafted. Educational talent search is considered a pre-college program. So that would make me working with that clientele of 6 through 12. And that encompasses a battery of services that prepare young people, first-gen students particularly, to finish high school and matriculate into college. It's my job to kind of show them their college options and how college actually works. The families select the college that they attend. But the active college part of TRIO, we have a segment known as Student Support Services. That branch of TRIO works specifically with college age students.
Thank you.
So with your segment of the pre-college population, do you collaborate with JAG or those Jobs for America's Graduates and other programs that support the first generation students before they make a selection?
Can you repeat that? I didn't comprehend the statement or question.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So in your pre-college segment, do you collaborate with Jobs for America's Graduates, JAG, or any of those programs at the high schools to make sure you're capturing the audience well?
Great question. And in the past, we've worked with the JAG component at our local high schools that actually have a JAG program on the career awareness point of view, which pretty much provides our students with access to the various careers that also link them to majors, 4-year college majors that they must pursue in order to work in that career field. So yes, we've worked with JAG programs before. We have a vibrant one in Michigan City and one with the Gary School Community Corporation in Gary, Indiana. So yes, we've had those collaborations before. I really believe that the collaborations is a real true strength of the TRIO programs, because they intersect with a lot of different segments of public education and careers, because the arrow points back to college access and opportunity. Because of the way that the work trends are going in the state of Indiana, majority of the jobs in the next 10 to 20 years are going to require more than just a high school diploma, some type of post-secondary or technical training. So that's what makes TRIO programs a viable partner with the various programs within our communities. And I certainly want to underscore the fact that the state of Indiana is #1 in manufacturing outputs. I'll give you an example. In Northwest Indiana is steel production. 45% of the steel produced in the United States comes from our region, Northwest Indiana, Hammond, Gary, Indiana, the whole I-80 Beltway. 45% of the steel manufactured. So steel production and manufacturing is a way of life in Northwest Indiana. However, TRIO and post-secondary opportunities come into play because the way that companies, U.S. Steel, Bethlehem Steel, are manufacturing steel now is different than what they did 60 years ago, where they could do the furnace blast and dump steel manually. Those days are over with now. Now the steel production is being manufactured by high-tech equipment and specialized equipment that require post-secondary training, degree pathways that lead to a 4-year bachelor's degree or some type of technical license in order to work in that industry. And again, when first-gen students come to campus anywhere in the state of Indiana, there needs to be a level of wraparound support services provided. And this is what TRIO programs specialize in. Everything from advising to course selection to academic tutoring to also career awareness that shows you what's available beyond the surface.
Excellent. Any other questions for Maceo?
Well,
Right.
I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to share and leave you with that notion that hope breeds optimism. And as the current trends lend itself, I really believe that the state of Indiana can turn our fortunes around by our collaborations, our conversations that we're having, and our collaboration of resources. And that's in alignment with the chairman's vision of the state of Indiana being a top 10 in human capital development as we move forward. So as president of Indiana TRIO, I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to partner, to share, and more importantly, to combine resources as thought leaders in this industry.
Thank you.
Hey, Maceo, this is Chris Lowry. I walked in a couple minutes late. Loved your presentation. Thanks for your partnership. It's nice seeing you 2 weeks in a row, two Tuesdays in a row. How's that? I have to figure out what we're each doing next Tuesday. So, but thank you. Thanks for the work of TRIO and for your leadership.
Not a problem. And Chris, I thank you for setting a stellar example of the level of advocacy and having the backbone and the voice to be able to bring awareness to some of these educational pathways and the things that we could be doing much better to create avenues of success for all Hoosier students. Thanks for setting the example.
Excellent.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Maceo and Stacy. I believe. Thank you for bringing Maceo to us with this information. But I believe you have yet another speaker for us today, correct?
Yes, we have 3 more representing campuses that have been nationally recognized for their support for first-generation students. So next on our docket is Dr. Colin Feuer with Purdue Northwest. And he also has a presentation that I will share here in just a moment. All right.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for the opportunity to come and meet all you folks. I am Colin Feuer. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at PNW. Full disclosure, TRIO is in my area. TRIO reports to me. Maceo actually reports to me. So we are coordinating our presentation so as not to make it too PNW heavy here. But we are, right in the middle of I think a really exciting, almost a renaissance in our approach to first generation students. We have always served first generation students, but as you know, it's just sort of recently in the last decade, especially that in the face of declining enrollments, that institutions have started to really segment their populations and to understand the needs of specific populations. So right now we have 56% of incoming students who identify as first gen students. And that number, by the way, the enrollment number 8,900 is the IPEDS number. So there's dual credit concurrent enrollment students included in that. It's not a great reflection of our what we call our core student body. you can just flip to the next slide there. I don't think I really need to go over all these statistics for this group, but just to sort of paint the picture of where we're at here, and especially in terms of the impact that some of these circumstances have on first-gen students. Really, number one is the income level of first-gen students. So the median parental income, and most of this is from the NASPA first generation resource page. By the way, those numbers can change depending on what source you're looking at. But so the median income is less than half of continuing generation students, obviously, because of the effect that a college degree has on your lifetime earnings. And we see that all the time in our first gen students. At PNW, according to the latest numbers we have, about 70% of our students work at least part-time. So these are students who are working sometimes 1, 2, 3 jobs. And then if you look at the next statistic, 30% have dependents. So they have families to support, they have kids to support. A lot of our students actually put a lot of financial support into supporting their parents. So they're trying to balance, the traditional college education, which of course is built around, a day of classes, which for a lot of our students is a work day. But because of that income level, they just can't do it in many cases without working at the same time. The numbers for persistence into the second year are actually not bad nationwide. So 82% for four-year publics, and it's 86% for continuing generation students. But then there's a real drop off. So there's only 20% of first gen students who have a four-year degree after 6 years.
Colin?
And so, yeah. Sorry?
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think there's a lot of us that are only seeing a list of files on our screen and not actual slides. So I don't know
Okay.
if we have a view issue there. Just want to make sure we're tracking with you because this information is
Yeah.
really important.
I think we have a view issue here because we're on our big screen, we see the list here.
Hold on.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt the flow there.
I'm glad
No
you
problem.
did.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, important.
She should be able to see that.
Do you see it now?
All right.
All right.
Mhm.
From current slide. Yep. Are you seeing it now? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Right. So there's this huge drop off as first gen students continue in their degree programs. So with only 20% as compared to 49% of continuing generation students. And that sort of illustrates the issue that we're dealing with here and the resources that first gen students need. The other thing that really has, certainly been our experience is that most first gen students don't see themselves as first gen students in the sense that it's not a thing to them. They don't realize that they're the first person in their family to go to college or the first the member of their generation to go to college in their family. And they don't realize that sort of specific needs and issues come up with that. They don't sort of naturally seek out each other and sort of get help from each other. So that's a space where the institutions can really step in and kind of build communities that have these kind of common needs. And that's, goes to the next point. The bottom line is that what first gen students need more than anything else is customized supports, especially mentorship and resources for them. Because they don't have, parents who can answer all their questions. We had a panel for first gen students a couple of months ago. And one of our panelists, first gen student, I think just nailed it on the head. She said, this was the first time in my life that I haven't been able to go to my mom and dad with questions. Someone made a reference, I think it was Julie actually made a reference to the hidden curriculum, to sort of the things you need to know. Like, we're dealing with a population that they don't know like what a credit hour is. They don't know what a dean is. They don't know what a chancellor is. And there's no one who can answer those questions for them in their family. So it's the institution, it becomes the institution's responsibility to sort of step up and sort of take the place of that parent and provide that friendly face who can sort of mentor them through the process. In my perfect world, and we've talked about all kinds of, versions of this, it would really be the academic advisor who's sort of that friendly face, but at least at PNW, academic advisors, and then that this is pretty standard. They have a caseload of, 300 or 400 students, so they are just not in a place to be able to do the sort of handholding that is required, to mentor these students. And the other thing that I've certainly seen over the years is that these students are bright and talented. I mean, they're coming into school with, a couple paces behind the starting line in many cases, but they can finish. They can do it. They can get across that finish line if they have the supports. And so, we've become very passionate at PNW about becoming an institution that provides those supports and allows these kids to flourish and develop their full potential, because they can do it. They absolutely can do it. I guess we can go on to the next stage. We're pretty early on in our first generation journey. So we did join the NASPA, the National Association of Student Affairs Professionals, First Gen Forward. This is, I think, their third First Gen Forward cohort. They established this institution or center for first generation student success, I believe, like in 18 or 19, not too long ago. And these are great partners. I mean, some of you have probably met Kevin Kruger, the president of NASPA. He's a first gen student himself. He likes to tell the story of how he chose his major because someone asked him what his major was going to be, and he panicked. And there was a list of possible majors behind the recruiter, and he randomly picked one, history and political science, because he didn't know what a major was. He did not know what a major was. So, these are just things that, if you're a continuing gen student or a person who comes from a continuing gen background, it wouldn't even occur to you to not know things like that. But that's what this population struggles with. NASPA has been really out front in kind of creating communities around first gen students. So now we've got about 150 schools, and they put us into regional cohorts. So we spent the last year having regular meetings with our cohort partners and sort of exchanging ideas. And that really inspired us to create a whole plan for programming moving forward. So I just wanted to, sort of celebrate what NASPA is doing, and they've been fantastic for us and have really helped us put first gen on our institutional leadership's map. It is hard to get on your institutional leadership's radar, but they've really given us some fantastic ideas for doing it. And I'll admit, like, I was a little dubious initially, and credit where credit is due. It's really Catalina Rodriguez, who was the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Educational Opportunity Programs, who reported to me, who really led the charge on this. And she and I went back and forth. I was sort of like, look, we're making a major push to be a Hispanic serving institution. We're really, looking at ways to bring in more African American students. Are we throwing too much at our students? I mean, are we asking them to identify with too many hats? So I was a little dubious, but I'll explain in a little bit further. But I've changed my mind. I mean, I think it's absolutely an identity that when you explain to first gen students that this is who you are, and you share these characteristics with everybody else, and you deserve to be celebrated for being this person, they want to hold on to that. They really do. So I've become a real sort of believer in the first gen identity as a component of our mission. We can go to the next slide there. So just to sort of review some of the initiatives, the institutional initiatives that we've done. The first one is the one that I'm the most excited about. So Catalina, as some of you know, recently left to follow her husband to Texas. Really a big loss for PNW. But we took this opportunity to rewrite her job description. So she was the Associate Vice Chancellor for Educational Opportunity Programs, which meant that she basically supervised the TRIO programs. So we redesigned the job so that it's 50% grant funds and 50% institutional funds. And the job description has, both supervising TRIO, which is, there are certain rules associated with the TRIO grant program. They can't recruit for the institution that hosts them or things like that. So there has to be sort of a wall there. But in this executive director position, they supervise TRIO, but then they also have an institutional mission specifically to support first gen students. So we're committing a full-time, executive level position to work on developing programming and supports specifically for first gen students. So they will have the Student Support Services TRIO grant program within their portfolio. But at PNW, for example, that portfolio, that grant only supports 200 students. We have well over 2,000 first-gen students. So this person will be responsible for all PNW first-gen students, not just the 200 that SSS can support. So I'm super excited about that. The response to this job posting has been phenomenal. We have some really big names in the TRIO world who have applied for it. People that I'm sure you would recognize if I name them. So we're hoping to have that person in place by June 1st. And if there's several people in the mix. If we get any one of those, it'll be absolutely fantastic. We're super excited. A lot of this is our first year in the cohort, so our efforts were somewhat limited just in the last semester. We did decide to do a cord distribution and have them formally recognized by the chancellor at the commencement. That was sort of what we were able to put together for our December commencement. But I'll tell you, like, we tabled, we put out a campus announcement. That's an example of what we distributed to the students, and that's our little logo that we had the marketing team design. And we basically crossed our fingers and said, will they come and claim this? And hundreds of them came and got their cords. And then so we had them all stand up at commencement. And I'll tell you that 60 seconds, like half the room, it felt like stood up. Faculty were standing up, they were wearing the cords, and there was like this moment. And they were all, it was like a Disney movie. Like they were all looking at each other, going like, Malcolm DeKrieger, our trustee, was there. He said that was like his favorite moment at this or any other commencement. And that moment supercharged our institutional commitment to first-gen students, because I think we all realized at that moment that this is an identity that they want to claim. It cuts across gender, race, ethnicity. It's something that they all have in common. So we are, doubling down, including with our executive director position, on really sort of building up our institutional identity as a first-gen serving institution. So I don't know, it might look just symbolic, like the cords and everything, but for us, it was just a huge part of our journey to becoming a first-gen institution. And then we can go to the next slide there.
Excuse me, this
Sure.
is Erica Studerman, and I have a quick question. I love
Sure.
the idea of the cords and the recognition of first gen. I was just wondering, do you also do that for veterans?
Yes, we do. We have the veterans are recognized at commencement. They do pick up their stoles, prior to commencement, and then there's a moment where the chancellor recognizes them. They all stand up, and generally they get a big round of applause. And so yeah, we absolutely do that.
So you could have an individual who's a first gen military retiree or still serving or reservist and just be layered with stoles and recognition.
Yeah. Well, we get that all the time, because we our Latino students get a special stole, our African American students get a special stole, our LGBTQ students get a special stole, and then they just they like it. I was sort of, are we making them wear too many hats? But they love it. That some of them are walking around with like, it looks like a fur coat almost of stoles.
I love
it.
that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great. And then we're going to build that into more of a ceremony where we invite the first gen students and their parents to come in, and so they'll get their stole, they'll get their cord, and then they invite parents to, or they give a little speech of thanks to their parents for supporting them. We've done this on a small scale with our SSS students, and it's a beautiful ceremony. Everyone's crying, the parents are crying, the kids are crying. So we're going to do that for all of our students now, not just for the SSS students. I actually forgot to put this on the list, but next semester we're doing 2 first-year experience courses specifically for first-gen students, taught by first-gen instructors who will, sort of, again, become those mentors for the students. And they're designing first-gen specific curricula to orient the students, for an entire semester into what it really means to be a college student, and especially a first-gen college student. I don't need to go through the whole list. We're doing all kinds of other stuff as well. But I mean, the FYE courses and the stole ceremony are really the things that I'm most excited about in terms of our programming. The position is going to be fantastic. We're really moving forward. we're looking at starting a Tri Alpha chapter, which is the National Honor Society for first gen students. A lot of institutions who are first gen serving have one of those, and they're a great, as dean of students, I sometimes have mixed feelings about Greek organizations, but this one is great. I have no reservations about Tri Alpha. And then all kinds of other marketing stuff, that sort of you can see there. So I can just answer questions about any of that. But bottom line is, I think, our experience so far has been that when an institution commits to first gen students, they really respond. So, if you sort of build those supports in place, that is the key, especially the mentoring component of it. That's the key to the student success for this population, because they are absolutely capable of succeeding. So, yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Any questions?
I have one question.
Sure.
So looking at all of the resources, like the developing resources that you had just mentioned, I know in the cohort, it mentions, recruiting and development, for first gen. What are some of the recruitment practices?
Well, so there's a couple of ways that we go about. I would say that we don't target first gen students
Yeah.
specifically in our recruiting. We target Hispanic students, we target African American students. So we don't segment them out into first gen students in our recruiting. What we do is when they answer the question on the application, that's when our programming sort of kicks in. So they get a customized letter saying, hey, did you know you're a first gen student? So their welcome letter and their financial aid package right from the very beginning sort of calls that out and says, this is an identity for you. There's special resources for you, be aware of those resources. But it's sort of hard in a typical recruiting cycle. If you're going to high schools and stuff like
Right.
that, it's a little bit hard
That was my
to
question.
target, just the first generation segment of that high school. That said, though, we have had, I've mentioned we had a first gen panel, and we brought high school and middle school students to that panel. That was the audience for the panel. Of course, not all of them were first gen. Like, you can't really separate them out that way. But it was specifically kind of for the first gen students and that audience to make them realize that, that college is something, it's a thing,
Right.
And it's an important thing in their lives, even if they don't realize it yet. So, yeah.
Good. Any other questions?
Yeah, Stacy, I'll offer one. First of all, Dr. Fuhr, thank you. I love seeing this work. Madison referenced, I think you answered in reference to her talking about the first gen students getting an email, et cetera, and saying resources are identified for them. Earlier in your one of your slides you had, I put here, quote, customized supports are best for first gen students. I'm always curious around customized and specific and so forth. Even out of those, is there a Pareto that exists? Is there something where we look at and we go, it's like, out of the list of things we might be able to do, these two over here sort of impact everybody. And part of the reason I ask is I'm thinking about resources.
Mhm.
And so whether
Yeah.
that's state funding we have, whether it's a significant funder who called me yesterday and said, hey, Chris, especially around persistence and so forth,
Mhm.
get back to me. I'm not looking for instant answers from you, but would you say there are specific things? Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think I know what you're asking. I mean, to me at least, what we've seen is that anything around mentorship, is the most important and impactful. They need somebody who they can go to a lot, to sort of help them through, to let them, know things questions that they don't even know to ask yet, to let them know what they don't know to ask about. And whether that comes in the form of peer mentorship or, we depend a lot on our campus ambassadors who are part of our admissions team. They're student employees for the most part themselves, and And so they're sort of friendly faces for, not just for, they don't specifically do first gen, they do all students, but they have become a really important resource for first gen students. And then training faculty is like hugely, hugely important, and giving faculty sort of space and incentives to mentor students. There was a statistic that I was toying with quoting, but I didn't, that something like 25%, only 25% of students in the aggregate identified themselves as having a mentor in college. And that mentor was, I don't remember the exact number, was overwhelmingly faculty. But they didn't separate out first gen, but African American and Hispanic students were much less likely than that to identify themselves as having a mentor. So, training and incentivizing faculty to really, to have the resources and to use the resources to, to do more than just, grade the papers and do the lectures is a really important component of that. That said, all of our staff and student affairs are really, really good at sort of reaching out to students, managing students, especially first gen students. So Rose Hyatt, who's in our student support area, she's sort of like all of their grandmas, and it's funny, the things that don't occur to you. Like, I've heard students say, like, oh, one of the things that Miss Rose does is she'll like go through my email and she'll find these things in my, because they never look at their student email. They don't like, and she'll go like, oh, that would be a really good opportunity for you. Like, so just someone to do stuff like that almost wouldn't even occur to people. That is hugely, hugely impactful, and then as the years go on and they realize they belong there, those supports they start to be able to do more things for themselves. But the first couple of years, are just absolutely critical. So you just got to surround them with friendly faces. But as you say, it's very resource intensive. So, but it takes a commitment.
Maceo, you had a question? You're on mute. Maceo, can you hear us? You're on mute.
You might be able to unmute him on his little.
Yeah, thank you. If I can take a quick bite, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, if I could take a quick bite at that apple when it relates to the mentorship, especially at my level, at the pre-college level, before students actually get into college situation. But the mentorship, the guidance, and the exposure to the role model scenario could often make the difference between whether you actually go to college or not, or even see education as a viable option. Any first gen kid that's pre-college that has been around me for 10 minutes will know that I'm a strong advocate of literacy. That I'm going to ask you the question, what nonfiction book are you reading? Because first gen literacy is a work in and of itself. The average low income first gen kid reads almost 2 grade levels below the national norm. So exposure to literacy, reading nonfiction materials that can help increase your vocabulary, your word fluency, and also practical knowledge that you could take into a classroom is really a benefit for first gen students at the pre-college level. So any kid that's been around me for any period of time is going to be asked that question, knows that question is coming. What book are you reading? And I think that it's important that when we grow and nurture first gen kids at the pre-college level, especially 6th, 7th, and 8th grade young high school students as well, literacy has to be the order of the day. And then secondly, even that notion of being at the pre-college level, dressing for success. I stand before you now totally different as a first gen student from a disposition point of view because of the access to strong role models and people that have high expectations. We want our young people before they enter the academy to dress like a prospect as opposed to a suspect. And those are things that need to be addressed. And I can coin that phrase for you if you like, but it's made all the difference in terms of enhancing and amplifying the quality of the academy. And thirdly, we saw as well, again, at the pre-college level, this notion of young people, first gen students, not gambling with your life. You only get one life. And since I represent the urban education experience, those students that you have that are coming from the urban theaters of America, whether it's Chicago, Indianapolis, East St. Louis, Compton, Houston, whatever, the urban experience, being able to embrace that notion of not gambling with your life. We saw during the pandemic and after the pandemic, a whole generation of disengaged youth that were doing everything from not attending school, not engaging in constructive activities, to being involved intimately with the criminal justice system. So to turn these dismal statistics away, it requires strong role models and strong educators at the pre-college level that can adequately prepare first-gen students to enter the academy without having to exhaust the resources of the institution with staff and also abundant amount of resources to accommodate intervention-wise for first-gen students who may not be ready to enter the academy. That's food for thought.
Thank you. I think we're going to go ahead and move on. Thank you again to both of you for your comments thus far. We have Dennis and Aaron, our next two speakers. And Dennis, I'll go ahead and open your presentation. Maybe.
Great, thank you very much. Do you want me to just share my screen?
Oh, yeah, we could do that.
Okay, I'll just do that.
Perfect.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis Bowling. I am my official role here at Purdue as Senior Associate Director for Student Success. So I work with a number of different programs that work directly with first generation students. But I thought I'd first begin to give you kind of a generalized picture of first generation status students here at West Lafayette. As you know, we're a selective university. We're a very large university. We have over 40,000 undergraduates. When I first started diving into work at first gen status at West Lafayette, one of the things that I think surprised a lot of people was how many first generation students are there. There was this assumption, I think, for a lot of people on campus that there weren't very many of them. And there are right now, about 16% of the undergraduate body are first generation students. So that's a little over 6,000. That's obviously less than our partner institutions across the state, but that gives you a sense of kind of where we lie in the first gen realm. One other piece of data I just pulled up today was grade distribution. So one of the things I was curious about is how is our first generation students doing? And so I'm happy to report that 48 or 46% of our first gen students received A's. 26 received a B grade. So, you know, they may have had A's and B's, so we'd be in that percentage. But 11% of our first generation students received a D, F, or W. And so,
Dennis, we lost your presentation there.
You have a lovely family, though.
Oh, there you go. That was when we were younger and I was skinnier. Is that back?
It's back, yes.
It is back. All right, wonderful. That was up in Macio's area, up in the dunes area. So, so to give you a sense of our first gen rates and our retention rate. So this is last year was 84% for our 1 year retention rate. Our 4-year graduation rate was 58%. The Purdue average overall non-first generation was higher, around 63%, I believe. And our 5-year graduation rate from our last cohort was 74%. When we look at 4-year graduation rates, a lot of things obvious, and I'm speaking to the choir of this, affect that. One of them is our pharmacy program. So as you know, with pharmacy programs, you simply cannot graduate in 4 years. It is impossible. But we also have a lot of students who switch majors, and which causes them to possibly fall off track. and doesn't allow them to graduate in 4 years. Although our president, both our former president, our current president, are really pushing our summer session as being a very robust experience for students so they can get back on track and graduate in a timely manner. Again, some general first generation stuff, and then I'll go into 2 programs that I help serve with. We are a first gen forward institution, like our colleagues at Purdue Northwest. We were part of the original cohort, and I would echo with my colleagues that it's been a really good relationship. We've been to conferences and other dialogues with other campuses to learn more about it. Pre-COVID, so literally a month before everything went haywire, we had a campus-wide symposium that myself and a couple of colleagues ran that talked about the data of first gen status. We brought in the president of the Center for First Generation Studies, and I'm not sure if I got that title right, to talk about first gen status, barriers, ways of thinking of asset-based communications to our students. We actually then followed that up with a provost-wide state system-wide meeting regarding first generation status. A couple of new initiatives that are coming up. We have a program called Early Start, which is kind of a program that allows students to come into campus during the summer, take a few classes to help prepare them and get used to campus ahead of time. And this year we're going to offer that program for free for Pell eligible students. While that's not specifically first generation students, we do know a lot of Pell eligible students are first gen. This year we also had a campus-wide first gen celebration during first gen week. It was very well attended by students, faculties, and staff, and it was a way of celebrating our first generation students. We also have a website that's dedicated to first gen students with data, but also terminology to help parents and students kind of understand higher ed lingo. And we also have a first gen student organization that does programming and support, and our director of Purdue Promise is their academic advisor. So very happy with kind of where we're going in that realm. But as I said, I want to highlight the programs that I work with. We in Student Success, we have 8 unique programs and centers that work towards basically from the beginning of a student's experience during orientation programs, as well as all the way through programs through graduation. The 4 programs I specifically work with is our Veteran Success Center, which again does house a lot of first generation students. Usually they're non-traditional students as well. We also work with a lot of spouses and students using veteran benefits from their mother or father. And so those are first generation students. We also have a non-traditional student program called Span Plan. Some of those students are also first gen, but the 2 specific programs I want to highlight is our TRIO program, which I know Maceo did a great job of talking a little bit about TRIO programs in general, but I'll dive into what we do here at West Lafayette. And then our Purdue Promise program, which I know a number of you know about because you stole our director. I'm just kidding, Chris. We're very happy. We're very happy that she landed and stayed and is doing the good work that she did here. So, but I'll talk about that as well. So Horizon Student Support Services is a federal TRIO program. I won't go into kind of the history and the background of it, since Maceo did a great job of that. We've been around since 1978. So we've had a pretty long history here at Purdue with our federal TRIO program. It is a federal grant program. The grant is in a 5-year cycle. We received our last grant approval in 2000. And so we're funded to 2025. And then so next in a year and a half, we'll be right back at it writing another grant. The grant is about $400,000 per year to support 340 students, which makes us one of the largest TRIO student support services program in the state. So what do? We basically do a number of different things. We do career counseling. So we do have a career office here, but we do supplemental career counseling. We have a case management program. So colleagues have talked about that wraparound holistic services. And so each member of the TRIO Horizon community, each student has a person who is their person. It has a much lower student to employee ratio. It's about less than 100 students per person. So you can get to know them very, very well. We offer free tutoring for our students. And so if there is any issues with math, science, foreign languages, whatever, we'll help set up a tutor and we'll pay for it. Part of our components, our services in TRIO is financial aid assistance. So we help students cut through the red tape, get them directly connected to a financial aid officer that can help them with all their FAFSA questions and a lot of curveball questions that come up. Some of our students are financially independent. Some of our students do not get financial information from their parents, but are still claimed as a dependent. So there's a lot of navigation when it comes to FAFSA related activities. And hopefully on a side note, the FAFSA Simplification Act that's going through this year and then will show itself next year will help with a lot of that. My colleagues in Northwest talked about mentoring, and I couldn't agree more that mentoring is an important piece. So we do have a peer mentoring program. But one thing, we have a long-standing faculty mentoring program too. Found for a lot of our first-generation low-income students simply are intimidated to go see a faculty member. They are, faculty members can be intimidating, and so we try to cut through that. So we assign them a faculty mentor who will work closely with them, help them, advise them. In some cases, they've been a part of research together. So to help kind of normalize faculty-student relationships. So we do that as an important key as well. One things we also have is classes. We offer freshman classes through to help with college success strategies and things like that. What you'll notice that's not on there is scholarship. As Maceo said, we're not a scholarship-based program, so it is about support. They do get financial aid through the university, of course, but they do not receive any scholarship funding through this grant program. Two other things I'll mention that are not on here that should be is a study abroad program. One of the things we're really excited about, we've been doing this for a number of years. We received funding from Purdue's International Programs Office to support low-income first-generation Horizon students to go on study abroad. As you all know, study abroad can be very expensive. And so our international students have given us $50,000 a year to subsidize any study abroad program. In general, we've gone overseas with our students, and it's cost out of pocket to the student around $500. And that includes housing, food, and flight and credit hours. So it's the best deal around when it comes to study abroad. This year, we're going to Costa Rica. In years past, we've gone to Greece, we've gone to Spain, Morocco, South Africa, Cusco, Peru. And so it's really an immersion, global leadership, and cultural awareness program. And it's really neat. I mean, some of these students have never left the state and are now, on their first flight, getting their passport, getting exposed to, exposed to the world. The other thing I'll mention that Maceo hinted upon was cultural activities. And so we do a number of different things, whether it's convocations and Broadway shows here on campus, or last 2 years, we've done a spring break trip. This year, we went to Cincinnati, where the students got to meet with the University of Cincinnati grad school. So they learned a little bit about what it takes to apply to graduate programs. They did cultural events, and they ended with a Broadway show called Tootsie. and they had no idea that Tootsie was a movie in the 80s. Even my director, who's much younger than me, I was trying to tell her about Dustin Hoffman, and she's like, "Oh, okay." Anyways, so that's a side note that made me feel really old. And now I want to see it actually. So that's our Horizons program. The next program I'll talk about that serves Purdue's first generation low income students is our Purdue Promise program. Our new director is Jasmine Clifton, who was worked a number of years within the program and was elevated to director. So Purdue Promise has been around for a number of years, and it's to support Indiana's 21st Century Scholar students that go to Purdue. There are two different tiers to Purdue Promise. One is Purdue Promise, which supports 21st Century Scholars who are first-time, full-time West Lafayette students that have an AGI of $50,000 or less. So it's the lowest income 21st Century Scholar students. We roughly serve about 300 Purdue Promise per year per cohort. And the other students, the 21st Century Scholar students, we average about 120 to 200 students each year who get a different level of support. As we talked about earlier, I really think the biggest job of Purdue Promise is provide that holistic support that is so necessary for students to thrive. Our students at Purdue are very academically prepared. They have, upwards of a 3.5, 3.6, 3.7 high school GPA. They have great SAT scores, but there are a lot of other barriers to their success, along with transitioning from higher education to undergraduate and financial as well. So in Purdue Promise, we offer the coaching model to provide that holistic support. We also provide a gap scholarship. So we cover through university funding, housing and other items to help them thrive and graduate debt-free as much as possible. So it's a really, it's basically a full ride scholarship program for those students. We do as well offer study abroad programs. This year we're going to Valencia, Spain, and Scotland. We actually secured additional funding from Purdue University's international programs, as well as programming monies from my department to send a group of about 60 students abroad. So that's been a really exciting thing as well. We do hire a Scholar Corps member to help with our 21st Century Scholars students, as well as provide those resources. We offer classes, again, college success strategy courses, as well as courses at the end of their term to help them transition from higher education to career or graduate school, and such. I thought I'd talk a little bit about a recent kind of a no-frills study I did. One of the things that I wanted to look at is what are some of the barriers to persistence. So what is causing students to leave Purdue University at West Lafayette? And so I really came, I actually literally looked at every student that left the university from 2016 cohort to the present. And of course, there's a lot of different reasons, but I think I could come up with 5 basic reasons why students are leaving. And the number one reason by far, and this is probably not surprising to anyone in the room or the virtual room, is mental health issues. I was just at a NASPA conference and they talked about the crisis of mental health across higher education. We are seeing it too in West Lafayette. The resources have been expanding in West Lafayette, but simply our students needed to leave West Lafayette, needed to leave higher education to take care of themselves through the stressors and that they are facing. The other issue is moving closer to home, and this kind of is that transition from high school to higher education. We had a number of students who came to Purdue and then didn't find the comfort level, or felt like they needed to be home because of financial reasons or whatever it may be. But there were a lot of students who commented that I am moving back to Terre Haute to go to Indiana State. The transition to higher education was another issue that we saw. Again, kind of that I'm not ready for college type of thing, or the kind of that fit of being ready to take college level courses. There was a number of reasons persisted out of that. Some students were changing their major or career path, I should have added, and Purdue did not offer it. I saw a number of students who would say, you know, I want to do, you know, maybe a more vocational education program, or another one was military and wanted to start the military right away, and so left Purdue for that reason. And finally, academic issues. So it wasn't that our students were failing. There were students who were failing out or not doing because of a lack of motivation. There were students who commented that I saw with their coaches that simply were like, well, I can go here for free and I'll do that for a year, and then, you know, and then, which is, you know, obviously very troubling to see. Some were just not quite academically prepared for it, but that was the minority. That was the minority. The academic issues a lot of time were overlapped with mental health concerns as well. So that gives you a kind of idea of what we're seeing as barriers to persistence, and we're working towards addressing each barrier this summer, including a number of different initiatives to help students be better prepared for mental health crises that may occur, to help them with their fit and transition and meeting friends here, et cetera. The last piece of data I want to show you, let me go back to sharing a different screen. And hold on one second, I'm sorry. I think this is one bit of outcomes that I like sharing, because it's a little different than what most people see. One of the things that I was curious about, and others, was about career, or how are students doing in, you know, post-secondary education. And so this is a data dashboard that we have within Purdue. This is every graduating class from 2013 to 2021 in aggregate. And this is the starting adjusted salary, adjusted the cost of living for our Horizon students. So you can see our starting salary for Horizon students is a little under $55,000 a year. And as you can see here, you'll see the minimum salary was $17,000. I'm guessing Peace Corps or something like that. The maximum salary was $129,000 during that period, which if I was making $129,000 at 22, I would be spending silly money, I imagine. And then this is Purdue Promise's starting salary. Again, minimum salary $10,000, $144,000 maximum salary during that period. I'll also show you, for your interest, is first generation. Take Purdue Promise out, and the breakout here during that same period at Foster Living was about $53,000 for first gen, and non-first gen around $60,000. When I dug into the data a little bit more, you know, one of the questions I had was, why is there a difference? You know, why is there a $7,000 average difference? Are students a first gen to applying for a professional position, you know, that they don't have the, you know, I think about myself, and I was not a first gen student, that when I was interviewing for the first time, mom and dad, I can lean on them about what it would take to apply, to, you know, how it works, and, you know, should I wear a business suit? Should I, you know, what should I say? You know, that kind of stuff. and so I don't know if that's a part of that. I will say there is one thing that I have seen, and that is a lack of STEM related interests of first generation students. And you know, and I'm sure there's a lot of research and Strata, someone just put on there a lot of powerful information about that. And I certainly see it day to day working with students. I also see, and this piece is completely anecdotal. And it's my personal experience. And I think of my daughter. My daughter is a very smart cookie. And at sixth grade, she took a test and it allowed her to take a accelerated math program. And so by eighth grade, she got to take high school algebra 1. And that tracked her to all the way to take, because she was able to do that for eighth grade, she took algebra 2, trig, whatever, and now she's in calculus BC. And she just got accepted to both IU and Purdue, and she's going to do, sadly, IU biology program, which is actually not sad. I'm an IU grad, but you get tuition remission if she goes here. So a little bit of sadness. But anyways, when I think about that, to me, it tells me that if she wouldn't have taken that test in sixth grade, she wouldn't be taking calculus BC now. And would she have really been accepted to IU's Bloomington program without calculus in biology? You'd have to talk to Bloomington's representatives about admission standards, but I'm guessing her application wouldn't look as good and she wouldn't have got accepted to the honors program there and got a scholarship. So anecdotally speaking, I think there's a lot of work we have to do educating students about STEM related fields early on. And some of it's demystification, because I know I see it here all the time where a student says, I want to be an engineer, but have literally no idea what an engineer is and what they do. And even if it's a good fit, it's to just see that they pay a lot of money, which is true. So anyways, I digress now. That is not research. That is just my own, that's my own opinion. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And thank you, Dennis. If you don't mind, we might hold questions to the end. We have one more speaker and then we'll wrap up, but that was a lot of good information that you shared. So now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Aaron Slocum with ISU. Thank you. And Aaron, do you want to present or do you want me to?
I will share my screen here. Let's see. Share.
Top right. Yeah, it's a little different than Zoom.
Can you all see my presentation?
We can.
All right, here we go. First and foremost, thank you to the Indiana Commission for Higher Education for allowing myself, on behalf of Indiana State University, to present to you some of the things that we are doing for our first generation college students. So I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you all for your time. In talking about our first generation college students, here at Indiana State, we knew that we had a lot of first generation students and that many of our offices was doing programming, but we were working in silos. So we wasn't communicating on what programming we can do. We was over programming each other. So we decided, hey, we need to do more purposeful programming with our first generation college students to allow for us to target a bigger audience and also allow for us to really pour into the students in a way that we wanted them to see fit. So the collaboration that ended up happening is between the ISU Mentoring Center, the University College, and Admissions or Enrollment Management. So we all have created a committee to do purposeful programming for our first generation students. In doing so, it was important for us to find out the number of first generation students that we have on our campus. And when we had the opportunity to pull information from our institutional research and collaborating with our Office of Student Financial Aid, we saw that we had 4,200 first generation college students on our campus, meaning that they may, be first generation first time freshmen or seniors. So in seeing that big number, we wanted to establish programming that was important for them. So as many of the other institutions have stated, Indiana State University is a first gen forward campus. And we started doing some intentional programming for them. The very first thing we decided to do is we started to create welcome meetings and socials. Due to the pandemic, we noticed that students needed help meeting their peers. They had a challenge introducing themselves, stepping outside of their box. So we wanted to break down that barrier for them and allow for them to get to know more of their peers. So we have had networking and discussions with our first generation students so that they can feel welcome and engaged here at the university. Really, in looking at the students that we are able to now serve, we as in the committee now receive weekly reports on institutional holds. We receive reports on how they're doing in classes. So we're being more targeted with our outreach with those particular students. We noticed that we also have a lot of first generation faculty and staff on campus. And it was important for us to establish a relationship with our faculty and staff because we needed them to assist us in helping the students. So with that, we decided to do a call out in some of our university communication. And we asked all faculty and staff to self-identify if they was a first generation college goer. If they selected that they were a first generation college goer, they received a small decal that they can place on their door so that when first generation students either walk into their office or ask to meet with them, they can see that decal and know that they're talking to an individual that was also a first generation college student. So from there, we really got our faculty and staff involved, and they started coming and presenting and engaging in a different way with our first generation college students. Doing workshops that goes all over the board. So for instance, we have had faculty members talk about imposter syndrome, time management, just a host research, just a host of faculty members wanting to engage, wanting to interact with first generation college students here on our campus. As a first gen forward campus, we have a big celebration. It's called our first generation celebration event. And this event is usually held during the month of September or November. We have our provost and our president speak to our first generation students. We have a host of professional speakers who are Indiana State University faculty and staff. And we also allow for our current students to speak to other students as well. Each individual student receives their certificate for their participation in the day. In addition to that, we invite our local Vigo County high schools to also come and see and engage with our students, our faculty, our staff, provost, and president, to also show those in high schools that they too, if they are a first generation college student or will be a first generation college student, that they are not alone. So we grant them the opportunity to eat in our cafeteria, which is always a big thing with the high school students, but also for them to tour our campus and to give them the opportunity to tour our campus, in addition to, meeting with and having intentional conversations with our first generation students. They actually host a panel where the students and the high school students get the opportunity to talk and discuss about, college life and what it's like transitioning from high school to college. The picture in front of you is from one of our events where we had a panel discussion. In this particular panel discussion, we allowed for our first generation students to be able to openly talk about whatever the questions they had. And we noticed that, with the questions that they were asking, they were brave enough to be vulnerable with us and sharing with us what they needed from us as professional staff members, but also what they needed from each other as peers. Some of the things that we found is that, facing homesickness, talked about mental health issues, talked about class, talked about financial issues. And with that, we was able to take that information back to our committee and incorporate some of the things that they discussed as barriers into our summer bridge program. Specifically here at Indiana State University, we have a summer bridge program called Project Success. Project Success is a program for all students, all first-year students who decide to elect into the program, where they get the opportunity to move in early, connect and create friendships with individuals as they come a week early prior to the start of school. During this week, they have targeted programming where we are very intentional about allowing for them to engage with student organizations, allowing for them to have socials, and we do educational seminars throughout the week that touch on imposter syndrome, time management, email etiquette, all those things that a first generation student or just a student coming from high school to college need to know. So giving them the opportunity to engage and interact with faculty, staff, and administrators on campus, allowed to break down that barrier and assist them in feeling that sense of belonging here at Indiana State. Some of the feedback that we also received during the student panel was that their parents wanted to assist them in helping, but of course, with them being first generation students, parents didn't understand what some of the issues were that their child was facing while here at Indiana State. So, and we incorporated a parent bridge week within our summer bridge program. So during this parent bridge week, we allow for the parents to meet, for an hour via Zoom, and allow for them to have the opportunity to engage with important offices on campus. For example, we have had the counseling center talk to our parents. We have had a financial aid session and allow for them to talk to our Office of Student Financial Aid to talk about different types of loans and how repayment works and all of the ins and outs of financial aid. We had the opportunity for the Dean of Students to engage with them and talk about, perseverance. And if you need assistance, I'm here to assist you and all that wonderful stuff. So allowing for the parents to be able to partake in a bridge week was very important. From that bridge week, we incorporated what is called Sycamore Fridays for potential student parents and current parents, where we also extended a monthly Friday, once a month on Fridays. We offer a workshop for parents to attend to learn about different offices and other things that we offer students here at Indiana State University, specifically hitting on important times like registration, financial holds and holds of that nature, in the museums, the shops and stuff of that nature. So really trying to break down that barrier for our first generation students and their families. Like always, I believe I've heard it multiple times throughout today's sessions. We have mentoring opportunities for both peer-to-peer mentoring, where we match a student with one of their student peers who may be an upperclassman, in addition to offering those upperclassmen, which would be juniors and seniors, the opportunity to have a professional mentor. So we are really allowing for them to interact and engage with each other in a way that is bringing and showing them what student success looks like, trying to provide them a wraparound services for them to be successful in the classroom and as productive citizens. I've kind of talked about this, but have an opportunity to know our target audience in regards to our first generation students here on campus. We have increased communication with them in regards to talking about, doing registration, sending out an email, letting them know that registration is about to happen. Meet with your academic advisor, sending them out tips for final exams, encourage them to go to homecoming events, university-sponsored homecoming events, spring week events, and opportunities for them to apply for scholarships on our scholarships website. But also some of the barriers that we all know that our first generation students struggle with is those registration holes, having a balance, financial holes, and being able to really talk and encourage them to see myself or another professional here on campus to assist them with those holes. We have noticed that students who receive these emails and see that they're struggling with something are more willing to ask for help during these times. So we send out a blanket email or a targeted email depending on what we're trying to do with them, and we notice that the students respond, and they're fine with asking for help. So we really get an opportunity to assist and help them throughout their time here at ISU. And that's some of the things that we are doing here at Indiana State University.
Well, thank you. And again, Pepper, I can't quite see you, but I know we're coming on, we're a little bit past time, but if there are any questions, maybe again, that we'd like to entertain today for our guests. I think you're on mute.
I apologize. If I had a dime for every time that happened to me. I was just thinking that there's a little bit of, it seems like overlap of services, but I don't think it is. It's just that we've heard from different organizations as far as who provides what, where, and some of it is just simply that we're talking about what's happening at the university versus what's happening at TRIO. But fantastic information. I didn't capture excellent notes to note exactly who's doing what, but I suspect someone did. So this could be, and if not, I can go back and listen to the recording. I just really appreciate each and every one of you taking this time to share with us and help us understand what is going on to help these precious students be successful in their academic careers and later in life. So Stacy, thank you for putting this together. In the interest of time, I think we probably will not have questions, and I'll just thank everybody for joining us.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Yes.
Thank you.